All right, so this week we're starting a brand new series. It's a brand new Christmas series. My name is Lou, and this is Community Church Online. All right, so if you're new, we are really glad that you decided to spend a little bit of time this week to tune in with us online. And if you want to let us know that you were here with us, we would love that. You can go over to communitychurch.net/connect. There's a little form on there. And for taking the time to do that, just to express our appreciation, we'll send you a gift card in the mail. Also, it might be good for you to know, especially if you have kids or are close with any kids or know any kids, we have new programs for kids every week on our app, on our website at communitychurch.net/media, and also on our YouTube channel. Well, as many of you know, we are preparing to relaunch on January 3rd, 2021, which is almost exactly a year from the day when we first launched. So we're doing some really cool stuff here in the building, changing a lot of things around, making it more COVID friendly. And we're meeting in the room upstairs instead of the small room downstairs. So it'll be exciting, it'll be great, we're really pumped. But if you were tracking with us last year in December of 2019, the good old days, 2019, you might remember something we did called 12 Days of Christmas. We worked with Babylon Village, the shops in Babylon Village, and basically what we did was give away free stuff from a different shop every single day, but there's a limited amount of things, and it's only for the 12 days leading up to Christmas. So, all that to say, more details will be released soon, but follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you want to know what's being given away and when it's being given away this year for Christmas. Well, all the cool stuff that's happening here in the building, and really everything that's happened so far since we launched here as a church in January 2020, has been made possible because there are so many really generous people who have decided to partner with us financially. And if you would like to do that, you can do that over at communitychurch.net/give. But please don't feel any pressure to give, especially if you're new. We're just glad that you're connected with us online today. Well, once again, I'm glad that you decided to spend some time tuning in with us, checking in with us, connecting with us today online, whenever you might be doing that. And we are really looking forward to relaunching in person. But until then, or until whenever you decide to join us in person, I hope that you enjoy this week's online service.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Oh, come, let us adore Him. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold Him come, offspring of a virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity, pleased as man with man to dwell. Jesus on Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Oh, come, let us adore Him. Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace, hail the Son of Righteousness. Light and life to all He brings, risen with healing in his wings. Mild he lays his glory by, born that man no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Oh, come let us adore him. Oh, come let us adore him.
All right, so this week we are kicking off a brand new, go ahead, say it with me, a brand new series. But it's not just any series, it's a Christmas series. Usually in my house, I'm kind of like the Grinch in the family. Like my wife likes to start watching Elf in July, and I'm not exaggerating at all. She literally will watch it in July. Me, it takes me a little bit longer to get a little like holly and jolly. But this year, I'm all about Christmas because why not, right? I mean, it's 2020. Let's get into the Christmas spirit. So we're doing a Christmas series. And over the next couple weeks, we are going to be looking at the Christmas story. The story about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And usually, like in our context, you really don't hear too much about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph unless, like, one, someone's really angry, or you're talking about the Christmas story, like the nativity, little thing we have under our Christmas trees. Now, let me just say this. For a long time in my life, I really was not very interested in the Christmas story. To me, it was just kind of boring. I really just felt like it was like the religious or like ethical moral of the story that we kind of had to talk about because, you know, like Jesus is the reason for the season. But I was way more excited to, you know, watch movies like The Grinch or hear stories about Kevin McAllister or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Burgermeister Meisterburger, like whatever your Christmas story was, like Christmas movie was, like I would much rather watch those, and like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph wasn't really into that whole story. But I have come to see this story as really, really something crazy. In fact, it breaks like all the rules of literary structure and what a good story is supposed to be. Really, this story is just one huge mess. It's a mess. Like, we have really hallmarked the Christmas story. You know, usually you'll see Christmas cards, everything seems like super great. It's like, you know, like a nice like star in the background, bunch of people totally content and happy to be among like smelly, dirty animals, right? But it's a crazy, crazy, scandalous story of fear and uncertainty and like humiliation. It's a really, really powerful story. And if we like look carefully, we can see something really, like we can pull a really, really powerful lesson from this mess of a Christmas story. And at the very least, I hope that it just totally shatters your impression, your like, you know, Christmas card impression of what the Christmas story is. And that we see it for like the nasty mess that it is. So speaking of messes, think about that for a second. Think about like a mess. You ever like walk into a room that's a mess? Maybe you made it, maybe you didn't. If you have kids, maybe you've walked into a mess that they've made. Like my little kids, I have a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, they like to go in their little playroom. Like my wife and I have given them a little area where all their toys are. We're like, okay, we'll kind of confine it there. But they like to go in there and just take like every single toy that they own, take it out of the box, lay it out on the ground, and it just looks like toy mountain in there. And it's overwhelming when you walk in there. I don't really do well with messes. I don't really know when this happened. I used to be totally fine. Now, messes just kind of like, they bother me. If I walk into my office or my bedroom or what, and I see things are a mess, like I don't want to be in there, I feel like I can't think clearly. It feels like control has kind of like slipped out of my hands, and I just want to do anything I can to kind of like put everything in its place and then be like, oh, okay, right, now I can breathe. And if you think about it, like, hasn't life kind of felt a little bit like that over the past, I don't know, several months, where like things are just a mess, you know, like nothing is really how we expect it to be. Things are out of place, stuff's getting canceled, other things are coming out. All of a sudden there are these new rules, regulations, we make plans, our plans get changed. It's like everything's out of order. And I don't know, maybe if you're like me, there's this feeling like maybe like we could get a little bit more control. Like, can we put things where they belong so we can just breathe and like embrace what's expected again, right? It's this feeling like things are just a mess. And like I mentioned before, this Christmas story is a mess, And if we look carefully at it, I think we could see like that God does some pretty amazing things in the midst of our messes. So I'll stop talking. I'm not going to stop talking, but I will read this story. Here's how it goes. And if you know this story, like try to just listen to it with like a clear mind. Pretend you've never heard it before. Totally new story, okay? So here's what happens. A little background information. There's this lady, her name's Elizabeth. Elizabeth is an older woman and she's pregnant. Her husband's name is Zachariah. She's actually the cousin of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And the baby that she's pregnant with is John, who grows up and becomes known as John the Baptist. Not like Baptist, like he went to a Baptist church, but Baptist as this like John the Baptizer. So a little background information, that's what's happening here. Ready? Here we go. We're in Luke chapter 1. It says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel, a messenger, to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. Now maybe you hear that and you're like, okay, couldn't we have thought about like another way to describe her? Right? Like, is this how you introduce your friends? No, but it's an important fact. So her name's Mary. The angel went to her and said, greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Like, this isn't the kind of thing that just happens every day. Probably you and I would have a similar response. But the angel said to her, don't be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. This is a good thing, right? You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants, that's Israel, forever. His kingdom will never end. Now, there's a lot going on there, a lot of like theological information. She's like the angel, Gabriel, he's alluding to like all of these promises that were made to the nation of Israel. And what he's saying to Mary is basically like, you're going to have this baby and he is going to fulfill he is the answer to all of these promises that everybody's waiting for. And then Mary has a question. And this is a reasonable question. It's a biological question. Remember that little description of Mary? She says, how will this be since I am a virgin? Like typically in situations like this, there's something that happens that didn't quite happen yet. And so how am I supposed to get pregnant? The angel goes on to explain that this is going to be a miracle. It's going to be a miraculous conception. She's going to keep her current like status in terms of her physical relationship. But she is going to conceive miraculously. Now for Mary, like maybe like you're thinking, oh wow, she must be so excited. This is probably really cool. She probably was excited, at least at first, after she got over like the sheer terror of seeing an angel. But it's like a good news, bad news situation. Like, have you ever been asked to be the best man or like the maid or matron of honor at a wedding? Typically it's like, oh great, oh no. Why? Because like, oh cool, what a privilege. Oh no, I have to give a speech, right? And most people like are pretty uncomfortable with stuff like that. For her, this is like that, but times 100. She's like, oh wow, what a great privilege. All of like my people, all of my nation have been waiting for someone. They've been promised this person is coming. I'm going to be the person who has this baby. And it's a miracle. What a cool thing to take part in. Like, oh goody. But then she's like, oh no, hold on a second. The fact that I am pregnant and I'm not married is gonna create some serious trouble for me. Like back then, it was a really, really, really big issue if you were pregnant and you had not been married. Not to mention the fact that she's engaged at this point to this guy named Joseph, and like, what's he gonna think of this? He's probably not gonna buy the whole like miraculous, I didn't do anything and there's just a baby in there story, right? But for her, like, In most contexts at that time, if this were to happen, someone would just be like found to be pregnant, that person would be dragged out in front of like the village, the town. Maybe if you remember when we talked about the story of the woman who was caught in adultery, she was dragged out in front of everybody. And then a lot of times she would be publicly shamed by her family, like disowned by her family. And then the person she was engaged to, if she were engaged or if she were married, he would then like disown her in front of everybody. Sometimes it had life-threatening implications. This was like very, very bad news. So like in Mary's mind, she's probably thinking this is exciting, but this could also be really horrible. In other words, like I'm in need of 2 miracles here, not one. And fortunately, she gets one, right? Like she tells Joseph, okay, hey Joseph, there's something you probably should know. I'm pregnant, but I didn't do anything. I know things don't normally happen like this. I probably seem a little crazy. And Joseph's probably like, yeah, okay. Joseph happened to be a really, really nice guy though. And so he decided, okay, relationship over. Like, let's wrap that up. But I'm not going to publicly shame you. I'm going to do it really quietly. And so he makes the plan to do that, which was probably heartbreaking. Like, that's one of those things where sometimes it's good to kind of read between the lines to understand what these people are going through. That's probably a really difficult conversation there, right? Like trying to explain this to your fiance and having him not believe you. That's hard. Like that does a lot to a relationship, but it's understandable. Okay, well, he goes to bed one night and he has a dream, and in this dream, he has an encounter with an angel, and it is just as miraculous as Mary, where the angel's like, hey, Joe, like, it's all good. She's telling the truth. And so he wakes up and he's like, okay, wow, what a relief. But like, oh, great. Oh, no. Now, like, I'm in the same boat with her. And now Joseph is either going to be known as somebody who married someone who cheated on him or somebody who got this girl pregnant that he wasn't married to. And back then, it was a really, really big deal. So when Mary initially got the message from the angel, like thankfully told her that there was something cool going on with Elizabeth too, her cousin, that older lady that I mentioned before. There was some kind of miraculous conception going on over there. It was very different, but something cool happening at the same time. So Mary goes to visit her. Now, one of the reasons that she goes to visit her, at least according to a lot of commentators and theologians and people who study this stuff, was to get away from the social humiliation and shame that she was dealing with in her hometown. Like just to go get some peace and quiet, where every time she went to the market to get a gallon of milk or whatever you went to the market for, like there weren't people looking at her and whispering, like her friendships would have been broken. People would not have wanted to associate with her. And so she gets away to go be with like the one person who understands that there's something amazing happening here. After that, like there happens to be this census that's ordered by the Roman Empire, which is like, oh, great timing. What a perfect time for something like this. And now everybody has to go back to their hometown so they can like count the people and do what they got to do for a Roman census. And Joseph has to go back to Bethlehem. Now, if you know the story, you know that Mary goes with him. But Mary was not married to Joseph at that point. She didn't have to go with him. A lot of people who have studied this believe that Mary was like, Joseph, there is no way I am staying back here by myself. Now that I'm not with Elizabeth, you are the only person who understands what's happening here. And so I'm going with you. And so like, just think about this. At this point in the story, Mary is very, very pregnant. And she's got to take a journey to Bethlehem, which is going to take several days, probably on the back of a donkey. Like, how bad would your situation have to be to want to travel through the desert for several days while being very, very pregnant? Like, I don't know what that's like, but I imagine, and I'm sure some of you can imagine much better than I can, it would have to be extremely, extremely difficult from a social standpoint to want to get out of there that badly. And then once she gets there, she's going to see Joseph's family. Like she's going to his hometown, and everyone there knows that he's not married. And I'm sure they're probably not going to buy the story either. So it's like anywhere they go, there's trouble following them. Well, the story goes from like messy to even messier. They show up in Bethlehem to Joseph's hometown, and probably because everyone was coming in from out of town to like their hometown, we know that there's no room for them. Traditionally, we say it's an inn, but really like basically we just know there was no space for them. The place was so packed that they like weren't letting the lady who's pregnant in. And so she's got to go give birth somewhere else because the baby's coming and there's no place for her to deliver. If you've seen like the little nativity sets outside of churches or like under a Christmas tree, you probably have seen some kind of barn that Mary and Joseph are in with baby Jesus. And it might have been a barn, it might have been a stable, it might have also been a cave. A lot of that's really just speculation, but we know she was outside and there were animals around. And so at this point, just kind of stop for a second, step back, and look at the picture as a whole. An angel comes and tells Mary and Joseph individually that something amazing is happening. God is doing something that is going to change the course of history, and they get to be part of that. And what does that mean for Mary and Joseph? Well, first, for Mary, it means that she's got to face like heartbreak from her fiance. This person that she's like pledged to be married to, she's told that he's like leaving her. He's going to divorce her. Now thinks she's looking at a future of like poverty and fear and uncertainty. Her family would not have understood. Her friends would not have understood. Then finally, like Joseph understands and he jumps in and sacrifices his reputation for her as well. And now they're like together, but alone at the same time because nobody believes their story. So Mary then like goes to see Elizabeth, just like one person who understands her story. She gets like a little break for a little while, a little break from like just the sheer humiliation and social torture that she's in. Then she comes back and finds out she's got to take a cross-country trip while being very, very pregnant through the desert on the back of a donkey. And at the end of the trip, like totally just spent, right? Like totally exhausted. She's told, hey, there's no room. There's no room for you. I can't even give you a bed to sleep on. And now it's time to give birth. And so finally, this pregnancy, like these 9 months of torture, these 9 months that were filled with like heartbreak and uncertainty and isolation and humiliation, like finally it's time for it to come to an end. It's time for the baby to come and there isn't even a bed. And so desperately, the two of them like just look for shelter and they go to a cave or some kind of barn and there's animals around. And I imagine like Mary looks at Joseph and she says, the baby is coming. And he's probably looking around like, there is no way. And there she like probably gets on the ground. And then Luke tells us there she gave birth to her firstborn, a son, Jesus, the one who was the answer to all of these promises. Like this is the way. This is the way that God was going to enter the world. Luke says, she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger. Now, I don't know about you, but like when I hear those words, like I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. That's right. That's how it ends. Like that's how Jesus came into the world. But think about how telling that is. She put the baby in a manger. That's a feeding trough. Like that's where you put the food for the animals. How desperate, how like spent, how exhausted would you have to be to take your newborn, like miraculously conceived baby and put it in a place where animals like eat? Put it where think of like a dog food dish. And that's where she puts Jesus. You know, like if you fast forward, if you know the story, like the shepherds eventually come and like the angel tells the shepherds, like, you'll know it's him because he'll be lying in a manger. You know why that was such like a key thing? Because he's going to be the only baby that's laying in a manger. That's not a place people put their babies. And this is how God enters the world. This is the Christmas story. It's a lot different from like the Hallmark version of the Christmas story. It is one utter, complete mess. It's not how I would have written it, but that's how it happened. And so if we step back, right, and we look at this Christmas story, this mess of a Christmas story, what we can see is that God delivers in unexpected ways. No one would have written the story this way. I wouldn't have written the story this way. I wouldn't have expected it to go this way. And yet this is the way that God decides that he's going to show up. This is the start of the Jesus story. It's a story that billions of people tell every single year, and it's been going on for 2,000 years. This is the grand entrance that God makes into the world. He delivers in unexpected ways, and this is the way he's been working all throughout history. We often see God like the clearest. We see his ability and his goodness the clearest in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes those are difficult ways, and often those are ways that seem like a mess. If you know any of the Old Testament, like the ancient history of Israel, like there are stories of people being saved from a furnace, right? Because of what looked like a mess, like they see God come through and deliver in a totally unexpected way. We see people being saved from like the mouths of lions in a totally unexpected way. They're able to see how good God is. We see like little boys, like little shepherds killing these war heroes like David and Goliath, right? It's an unexpected way that we see God's power. And this is how God works all throughout history. And so the king of the world, the creator of the universe, decides to come in obscurity, in a small town, like from parents who are now like social outcasts, on the ground, in a barn, around stinky animals. It was a mess. It was a mess. But that's how he decided to show up. One of the ancient prophets, Isaiah, says that Jesus would come and he would bring beauty from ashes. Like he would bring something beautiful out of something just totally dead and worthless. And I don't know about you, but like right now, so much of life seems like a mess. A mess. Like things are not the way that we would have written them. Things are not the way that we would have expected them to go. But if we look at the Christmas story, we could be reminded that God may be doing something in the middle of our mess. Maybe if we stopped like wanting so badly to get out of it and looked a little bit more closely at what he was doing in the middle of it, we might see that maybe he's trying to teach us something. So where are the messes in your life right now? Maybe there's a mess at home. Maybe there's a mess right now in your marriage. Maybe there's a mess right now between you and your kids or you and your parents. Maybe there's a mess at school. Maybe your work situation is a mess. Maybe there's something that is totally unexpected you would have never seen coming. And maybe God wants to show you something in that situation. God delivers in unexpected ways. You know, Mary's story, it was a mess. It started as a mess. And then we don't know too much about what life was like when Jesus was growing up, but we know that there was another mess at the end. When Jesus, this man who had proven himself to be different, who had proven himself to be powerful, who had said amazing things and done amazing things, was taken before the religious authorities, the people that were supposed to embrace him, the people who were supposed to recognize that he was the answer to these promises. And they decided they were going to put him on a cross. They were going to take his life in the most painful, torturous way they could have possibly taken it. And Mary sat there and she watched it all unfold. But that's not how the story ended. If you know the story, you know that 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead. And not long after that, Mary would come to understand exactly what was going on. Like on that cross, on that symbol of Roman torture and execution, Jesus was showing his radical love for the world. God, once again, was delivering in unexpected ways. And if nothing else, the picture of Jesus on a cross, every time we see a cross around someone's neck or a cross hanging up on the wall, we should be reminded that often God makes his most profound expressions of love for us in the most unexpected ways. So where are the messes in your life? Maybe if you step back and look at your life, it feels like you're looking at Toy Mountain. Everything's out of place. We have no control of anything. Nothing is where it should be. But maybe God is trying to show you something about himself. Maybe he's doing something amazing. Maybe God, once again, is delivering in an unexpected way. Thanks for hanging with us this week. Hope to see you next week for part 2 of An Unexpected Christmas.